Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, David Carr, founder of Steward Your Business, where we bring people together to accomplish great things. And this week, we have another great episode with Jordan Sotudeh, where we're going to talk about some of the challenges of a startup, living purpose-driven lives, going through the messy, getting to the meaningful of innovation, personal alignment, building mission-first businesses. That's what we're going to be getting into today. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. We're going to get into you're at the startup phase, you're in the funding phase, you're in a unique position. Well, we haven't had a lot of guests on here, but you have come from you have a solid background, Jordan. I'm excited to have you on here. I would love to have some folks listen a little bit to your journey, your story about what got you to Venaera today. And hopefully, folks, as you're listening, whether you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, what does it take to step out in faith, to live out your purpose, what your calling is? And I'd love you just to take us back a little bit, Jordan, to before you started Venaera as CEO and co-founder. Where did this idea? Where did you come from, and you got inspired in this space to really help in a unique way? So I'm going to let you just take us back a little bit. Give us a little story about your journey as a business owner and founder.
Sure. Yeah, we might have to go quite a ways back, but I hope that from listening to this, anybody out there who has any doubts realizes that if I can do it, absolutely anybody can do it.
There you go.
So, back in college, I lived by what everyone said, right? Do what you love. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Turns out I loved too many things. I ended up with 3 majors, a minor, a certificate, and I didn't know what to do with my life after that. And so, I flipped the question around. What would I do if my happiness were guaranteed? And the answer seemed kind of obvious at that point. I would do something that I thought would benefit humanity, that would matter after I died. Not because it brought me a name or meant anything like that, but because that it contributed to something bigger than myself. And that's why I got into the space sector at the time. At the time, it didn't have the kind of attention it has now. At the time, space was relatively quiet in the news. It seemed like something that we just hoped would grow, right? And as soon as we exist anywhere else, our chance of extinction goes way down. When it comes to the solution we're trying to help mitigate climate change and the effects of the environment here, space is kind of the only answer. As long as we have industry on Earth, it's going to be polluting. It doesn't matter how you power it. That's thermodynamics right there. However, over time, after 12 years in the space industry, I started to realize that all these things I thought other people had covered needed more help and attention than it turned out, I thought. And the climate solutions are out there, but they're not getting adopted. They're not getting used. And so over time, as I followed one of my mentor's advices to say, get closer to hardware. I moved from policy and NASA and strategy at Bryce over closer to JPL, which is, right next to hardware, right? There's all kinds of fascinating geniuses there building all kinds of amazing technology. And I kept a little notebook where I'd write down my ideas. And anytime I had something I thought was good, I'd look it up. And if I saw that somebody who was more qualified than me or who was already further along than I could be was doing it, I just crossed off the list and say, this is covered. And then at one point, I noticed that when it comes to energy use, when it comes to emissions, there is one sector that dominates the world. That is heating and cooling. Up to 80% of our emissions and energy use go to heating and cooling. And as the world becomes more prosperous globally, and as heating becomes more ubiquitous, that's only going to grow exponentially. This was a huge, huge piece of the puzzle to buying us more time on planet Earth before we mess it all up. And when I looked up this idea that I had about making a modular adaptive solution, it didn't seem like anybody was doing it. I went through patents, I went through research. There's nobody doing this. And the more I looked into the industry, the more I realized it was just like launch was back in the day. Launch was an industry ripe for disruption. A lot of legacy players who didn't want to invest in R&D, didn't want to innovate or disrupt themselves.
Yeah.
Just
Wow. So so what I encourage other people, as I'm hearing you, Jordan, say is there's plenty of opportunities out there. It's just paying attention. You were just taking notes and you're saying, look, you know, where where is something that's being neglected? And you saw, hey, there's an opportunity. And, like you said, addressing energy efficiencies and strain, it's like, well, it's not necessarily sexy, but it's something that's absolutely needed. And it's
exactly.
like you said, it's something across the world. And so sometimes I think people, I love that you're coming in this way, Jordan, because I feel like it's going to sustain you. I think people that get into business simply to make money that's a result of providing value and creating it. But if that's solely it, you're going to be hurting. In my experience, it's yes, we need money. You're raising funds and things like that, absolutely. But the goal ultimately is that you're creating positive change in the world. You're saying, where can I help? And I think, you could have stayed. I mean, you've been working at NASA or Bryce or JPL, which is, many people say, hey, that's a great job. That's very prestigious.
It
But
really was
you're
an
saying,
amazing place to
right?
live.
When
Yeah.
you say those names, people are like, oh, that's awesome. I think that's great. But you felt even a greater calling. It wasn't what I heard about you say, it's not just about me. It's like I could stay there and feel good about myself. I'm doing good things. They're doing great things. Something that
Absolutely.
somebody's there, but you felt the calling personally, I heard, and said, hey, I got to take the lead.
Yeah, if nobody else is, there's no reason why you shouldn't step up and do it.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
not going to stand here and judge anybody else's
Mhm.
passions at
Yeah.
all. But whatever
Mhm.
you do, there has to be something that sustains you through the difficulties because there will be so many of them.
Yes. Well, and here's what I found, in life, there's a tendency to, Jordan, I think, drift. And sometimes we just kind of fall into things. And
Absolutely.
it isn't, instead of you're being very intentional and saying, look, I'm going to design a path forward. And yes, it's going to be costly. It's going to take some time, but it's worth it. It's worth it because I see the greater, what I say, compelling vision of what could be that's driving me. And I think when we don't have a compelling vision, whether it's in our current job as an employee or an entrepreneur, um, it's very it's we're left lacking, or we're left like, man, I felt like, what did I do? What kind of legacy am I leaving? What kind of impact am I having really? Am I just living for myself, right, Jordan? That's what I hear you saying, is like looking to have a greater impact in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can share an exercise that I do that might
Hmm.
be helpful to people
Yeah.
trying to figure this out. I'll do kind of like a personal portfolio review every
Hmm.
1 to 2 years. I'll go way back to the beginning. What are my
Hmm.
fundamental assumptions about the universe, its nature, about the reality of being a human being, about
Hmm.
my experience, my lived experience in life? And then from there, you can draw out what your values are and then compare it to the actions that you live by in your life. Are they aligned or not? Where do you need to make changes?
Yeah. And I love that you do that, Jordan. I do the same similar thing. And I surround myself with similar people that will hold a mirror up to me and say, well, that's what you said your values were. That's what you said you were committed to, but your life doesn't necessarily reflect that. So is that really important to you or not? And having people in your life that surround yourself like that. I mean, I know you've created a team with you that sees the greater vision. And what I found as a business owner, working with business owners, particularly Jordan, I think at this stage of the game, you're in a great spot because you have to be crystal clear on why do you exist? Why is Venaera there? What are we trying to accomplish there? Obviously, regarding seed funding and other things. But what happens over time, I found, Jordan, as you grow, is if it diffuses and it can get, like you said, we can get lost in the organization. And then you're like, why aren't people like they don't see it because we haven't communicated it well, right? And I mean, you've got to get really, really crystal clear in communicating what Venaera stands for, why you're doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to dive into that at any point.
Yes, yes.
It is very important though to also consider that if you want to jump into something like this, you have to let go of any inclination to shift blame anywhere else.
Hmm.
Even if it's somebody else who did something, if you're the person who founded the company, if you're the person who's nominally leading it, it falls
Hmm.
on you, no matter what it is.
Right. So, so to get to that point, you said, like, HVAC, the heating, the element. like you saw, okay, there's a root problem here. How did you break that down? What were you doing to say, okay, there's enough here? Like, how did you just take this stack that break that down, Jordan? Say, okay, I'm gonna make a move on that because I'm saying I want other people to understand. We're going to talk about specifically what Venaera does, but I want them to think about like what's the thought process I need to be looking at, and then of course talk about what you saw with what you're doing at Venaera.
Yeah, so a lot of people, and there's no right or wrong way to approach this. A lot of
Mhm.
people will find innovative products by the personal experience of using the product. That is a super valid path. That is a great path. Absolutely. You have depth of experience with this particular product and you see where things need to go because it's not working for people.
Mhm.
I've always looked at things from macro scale. I was executive support in policy, strategy, and business management at multiple
Yep.
organizations. Supporting executives at DoD, NASA, Bryce Tech, and others. JPL as well, of course. So I look at things macro, right? If you look at the larger trends affecting society right now, there is a bunch of stuff that is tapping our energy usage.
Mhm.
Everything from data centers to AI to what I already mentioned with the growing use of heating and cooling. These
Yep.
things are going to cause exponential strain on an already aging grid infrastructure system. Through 2035 alone, the U.S. is going to need $2.5 trillion to upgrade its grid systems.
Oh.
And that's not accounting for a lot of these exponential growth factors, right? Nobody's accounting for the growth of AI and the data centers and how power
Mhm.
hungry they are in order to power that, right? That's going to be a whole other set of investments that's required. And if we keep using the HVAC systems that we have, it's going to be game over, man. Like it's just not going
Mhm.
to work. Um, and the more you dig into it, the more you'll see for it, right?
Mhm.
HVAC systems, if you look at the California Public Utilities Commission's reports on this, up to 20 to 30% inefficiencies are caused by, incorrect installation, improper maintenance, the rigid design of HVAC systems. You add to that when you don't take care of these systems, they don't perform anywhere nearly as well as they do on paper. So all of that amounts to $15.2 billion annually that we ratepayers pay in unnecessarily utility bills. So the more you dig into it, the more you see that this is something that just has to change.
Mhm.
And the more people I spoke to, we've had 130 plus customer discovery conversations with
Wow.
people who are utilities, governments, retrofit companies, developers, real estate, you name it. We've covered everybody, and of course, you have
Mhm.
to keep doing that.
Yep. Absolutely.
But we have huge validation. We have all the validation we need to know that this is a real problem and that our solution can address it.
Mhm.
By modularizing the HVAC system, the heat pump in this case, because heat pumps are already so much better than legacy systems. But by modularizing it, putting sensors at the inlet and outlet of each of those components, tracking that data, you open up so many things. Not only has our fantastic technical team
Mhm.
developed a way to cut energy usage 50% over other heat pumps, this design also enables life cycle savings on emissions from no longer needing to repair things by throwing away the whole unit.
Mhm.
You end up
Oh, yeah.
saving on every single metric that you could possibly think of for the longevity and the holistic approach of what is the right way to build things.
Mhm. Well, I like how you said this. I mean, you're looking so forward, and we need voices like yourselves, Jordan, that are I'll call it a pioneer voice, seeing what is coming down in the future, or a creative voice, and understanding and saying, look, you talked about the numeric value, billions and billions, is like of like, hey, and this isn't even including any expanse on this. So how can we do this and try some things? And I think sometimes we're hesitant. I know some folks are hesitant to like, oh, it's not quote unquote broken, or I don't know how to fix it. And I'm seeing you're saying, look, I'm willing to go out there and try. And yes, you were just before I think we recorded, you were saying, hey, the models are looking good, but we don't know that, and we have to be willing. I think speak a little bit to this willingness of and what you've been seeing as you've been going for it, of like prototyping, trying things. Hey, that didn't work. Go back to the drawing board, because some people they don't want to quote fail, but
Yeah.
talk about the journey of what you've been learning in this process, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a quote from a poem I really like. for those who feel like broken things can't be fixed. We're all broken. That's how the light gets in.
Mm.
So just because you feel like something is broken, or maybe that you feel like you're broken, that doesn't mean that there isn't so much more for you to give. The way to approach this, I think, is to try to thicken your skin as much as possible, especially if you're going to do hardware. Let me tell you, hardware is unforgiving, and that's why one of my mentors said, get as close as you can to hardware, because it will humble you, and that is something that I have found very valuable. It teaches you that you don't get to decide anything really. You have to work with it. You have to really work with it and be prepared for surprises constantly. And you can look at them as setbacks. If that's something that helps you think more constructively about how to move forward, that's okay. Think about it as a setback and build on that. But really, they're not, right? Really, it's part of the process. You have to fail in order to move forward. And that's something that I think a lot of people I've worked with agree with, even if they work in organizations that don't accept that anymore for cultural reasons.
I mean, I would imagine, talk a little bit about assembling your team at Venaera, Jordan, and like getting people that like get that vision, and like you said, hey, failing is an opportunity. It's a way of, like you said, maybe a challenge. They share this mindset of this can do, this innovation angle that you're coming up with, Jordan, because not everybody has that. How did you find those people, bring them on and get them onto your team and say, hey, this is I caught your vision, Jordan, and really had that same mindset. Can you speak to that, of creating that team in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky.
Oh, come on.
I got lucky. I mean, honestly, I got lucky. Like with so many things, there's so many entrepreneurs and successful people that come out, and yeah, sure, they had a part to do with it, but I think people really discount how much luck has to do with it. Luck has so much to do with it. You don't get to decide who you run into most of the time. Even if you're seeking them out, you don't get to decide that, right? In some ways, it feels like nobody gets to decide that, right? It just kind of happens. So I've known our co-founders for a very long time. Julian was he was there at the hospital as a baby when I was born. I have known
Oh my
him
gosh.
my entire
Wow.
life. He is he and a couple other people are the closest things I have to a brother. Alvan is also just a fantastic individual, just personally professional. They're both the best of the best. There's no questioning that, frankly. We were all we were working on this for years on top of very demanding day jobs. We all still, despite the, you can't avoid having being overtaxed in a situation like that. But despite that, all of us were still, performing really well in our day jobs, getting accolades and all the things that you would expect from high performers, I think, for the most part.
Well, I want to say you grew up with two of your co-founders. Is that what I'm hearing?
I grew up with one of them. Oh, cool. Great.
I don't know. I got my there we go. Celebrate.
Nice. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is worth celebrating. It is worth celebrating. Yeah, it is amazing to have those kinds of long-term friendships.
I'm gonna agree with you on that one, Jordan. I would say it may have been happenstance, or if luck, however you want to say it, that you happen to just be at the right place at the right time, where you guys are literally growing up or making those connections. But I do think, to your point, Jordan, building relationships over time, I'm sure you guys have seen each other through lots of different life circumstances.
Sure.
And building relationships so that you can be more authentic and real with each other, as opposed to maybe trying to be something different, but just be your authentic self, right?
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's a really great point. Something that did have to do with it is when you care about people and you put them first, and you can suspend whatever you need in interaction to think about what they need. That's how you build relationships over time. That's how you build a network of people that you can do anything with.
Right.
And at the same time, you have to be vocal about what you want to do. If I didn't talk about what I was trying to do all the time, nobody would have heard it and said, "Hey, I want to do this with you."
Right. Absolutely. So, so I want to go back and clarify Venaera where you're at. So as people hear this, you've assembled this team and you're talking about heat pumps. What's the ultimate, at the end of the day, when would you say Venaera is successful? How would you say we did our job, we were successful? What is the goal there? So when people say it and they remember Venaera and they say, what is that ultimately you're looking to solve? I mean, we talked around it, but I want to hear, like, if Venaera can do this, contributes to this. What would that be a win for you?
A win for us would be seeing our product in the marketplace. That's our earliest win.
Mm-hmm.
The long-term vision is that this entire industry is transformed and it becomes focused on having the level of efficiency and comfort that all of us deserve to be able to live the longest and best lives that we can on this planet. The product that we're building now is already going to save you 50% on energy. It's going to cut your maintenance costs by 90%, and the emissions by 60 to 70% over the lifetime of the product.
Is this going to be, just so I clarify too, Jordan, is this going to be both? Is this for both the end like home user, or is this going to be commercial, or is it kind of a combination of both?
Yeah, down the line, it'll be all of them. We hope to license it to every major manufacturer out there because it doesn't make sense for us to keep something so good to ourselves. Everybody should be doing it this way. We need the solution out there as fast as possible, affecting as wide a swath of the economy as possible. It's going to buy us more time. It's going to save us more money. It's just a better way of doing it. Like we really need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so part of what I found in the marketplace, Jordan, and I think, getting what you're saying is, I find people have great products or services and they make an amazing transformation. However, it's also getting that, and why I have you on the podcast candidly is because it's also, how do we make that message break through the rest of the noise out there, right? There's a lot of things out there that people say, yes, that's I do want to do that. Because one of the things I mentioned, I had another podcast guest on here where we were talking about return on investment. And a lot of people who's modeling are like, well, I just don't want to spend that kind of money. I'm only going to do this in the short time. So they have to have a bigger picture of like what you're saying, Jordan, to take action, right? Especially if the pain isn't big enough. So how are you guys getting that message out there?
Yeah, so that's something that's evolved, and I'd love to talk about how that's evolved so that people can get an understanding of how to work through this. So at first we were going to do residential because all of us were like, that's what we understand best, right? We understand that, we know people with houses, right?
Absolutely.
We can connect with that, right? And so we broke down the pricing decision. How do you decide what you're going to buy? When does it happen? How often does it happen? All that data is out there. You just got to dig into it. And if it doesn't exist, you just go out and talk to people and you can get it like that. Eventually, though, we realized that the life cycle benefits where our product really shines isn't going to be a huge draw in the residential market. Consumers don't pick that way. Consumers are like, what is this going to cost me now? And even with all these huge tax incentives, how many people are getting solar? You know what I mean? It's only when people feel like they get an immediate benefit that they make those kinds of choices. And that's, we can get into behavioral psychology on another podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
But which verticals do care about that, right? Commercial, institutional. These larger purchasers will look at our product and assess it on a life cycle scale. And when you do that, it stands out by miles. That drastically lowers our customer acquisition cost. It ends up giving us a ton of other benefits for the business. It just makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it's important, especially early on, like you said. Who are those clients, customers that have the money, can invest, see the value now? And like you said, the long-term vision is, yes, we do want to help residential and others as the company grows and we have the reach. I think that's a great perspective. I hope folks are listening so that you understand. And I have to do the same thing with my own business. I'm looking at that and evaluating too to be successful. So it's you're pulling a lot of things together, Jordan, all at once of these things, and keeping your finger on the pulse of all of those things. How do you do that on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like for you as a founder? Moving between all of these things.
Organized chaos. Organized chaos. You know that song, Part of the Bumblebees? Yeah, that's the one.
Go. I mean, it's challenging. I think that's where you want to have good, mentors or coaches or folks that have been ahead of you. I mean, we were talking to another colleague, Axel, who was on this podcast a while back. Other people that can help speak into you, that can help guide you, because we don't know what we don't know at times, right? And so it's like, oh, I didn't know, but I don't want to step into that, hole. So, again, surrounding yourself with, like you mentioned earlier, good mentors, so that
Absolutely.
you're focusing on what's most important, what's going to make the greatest impact difference, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'd also like to add to that you have to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to a few other people who've been going through the same thing, and I know we realize these things multiple times over our lives, right? But for most of your early career, every single problem you run into can be fixed with hard work and time. Every single problem, you just pull an all-nighter, you got it. Whatever it is, you can solve it that way. But at a certain point, that is no longer an option. In fact, at a certain point, that works against you. That hurts you more than it helps you.
Yep.
And then you have to do all this recovery stuff. So you end up finding out that you have to rely on people more than you've ever been used to. Even if you were a manager, managers jump in and help their team with all kinds of things all the time. They have to rely on people. It goes even beyond that. I think Ben Horowitz in his book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, says that the only thing that prepares you for being a founder is being a founder.
Yeah, well, sometimes, I have two children. Sometimes, some people say, when you have kids, they could tell you all about it, but until you have kids, you're like, I don't really truly know.
Yeah.
Or same thing, being married or whatever the case might be, a life experience. People can tell you about it to a certain degree, yes, but to your point, going through and actually living it out day by day, so important. But I want to echo I want to reaffirm what you said, Jordan, of like, you can't do it all. And in fact, you try to do it all, like you said, it's going to go against you. I just recorded another podcast with another gentleman from the environmental space, and we're talking about subcontractors and relationships and how important that is, because there's a lot of people that are specialists and they do it much better than you. And so why not have them in as part of your team? And I find that's the difference between people that really are successful, Jordan. What they're doing is they're like, I know what I do best. I'm going to focus in on that, and I'm going to get other people that do best. Now, because like you said, you can grind if you want before, but it's going to take you longer, and it's going to not best use of your time. And then what's our most valuable asset is our time, right? So, like you said, you may want to do that, but you might want to rethink that in the long term. And to your point, I think the urgency, what I hear you saying, Jordan, is like, hey, we've got a plan. We got to get this thing to market. We could take longer, but I really want to make sure that we get this with the right people and move it on. I don't want to be the bottleneck roadblock.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't foot stomp on your point enough that it is about the people that go along with you, and you can point to any other self-aggrandizing entrepreneur out there and see the same thing, right? Like, I like to say that SpaceX proves that anything is possible when you hire enough NASA engineers.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, so I know we're getting into the podcast. This is just because, but we're going to make sure that everybody can, find Venaera. You guys connect. You and I are connected on LinkedIn too. So if you guys want to connect with Jordan there, I think what you're doing is so important. We haven't talked about this specifically, this area of what you're doing. I mean, it sounds in some ways mundane, but when you think about it, everybody think about this. I live up here in Southern California, where we get snow, and if we don't have heat, or it's bad. And so think about the quality of life you're living, and we're very fortunate here in the States. But think about what that looks like for everybody going through the world, and the difference that you can make. In this case, Venaera is coming up with a unique way of their product, and so I'm excited about this, Jordan, because again, you're showing what's possible. And I think we need more folks, what I call, entrepreneurs, stepping out there, being innovative. We need more Jordans in the world, seeing the problem, checking it out, looking at that and saying, you know what? Nobody's really addressing this. and then come alongside and you help each other. For Jordan, you and I were talking earlier before we started recording the podcast, because I've had a number of different folks on the podcast, and I said, let's find synergy. My way of helping is introducing people, connecting people. That's what I do. But find whatever that personal why is, what drives you to be successful. And when I mean successful, like you said, making an impact, making the world better than you found it, leaving it in a better place. And so I so appreciate you sharing and coming on the podcast with us, Jordan. Last thoughts or things that you want to share with our audience as we're wrapping up today?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple quick things. One is that David's amazing. He's introduced us to a bunch of people. All of them say how great he is. That is a great measure of that being factual, And then also for people thinking about this, if you're in the US, you have a huge opportunity for this. There are so many organizations out there that want to help you get out there and start something for yourself. Our first accelerator, we founded with a Google search, and they are so aligned with us in values. Los Angeles Clean Tech Embedded, they're an amazing organization, and there's going to be one like that for you, whatever your business idea is.
Yeah, I love that, Jordan. You got out there, you're like, hey, we started researching, there's an accelerator. That's another one I was mentioning to you, Brooke, that we're going to have on. Something, get out there. But I think it just takes you, Jordan, you saw, hey, there's an area in this heating HVAC area that's not being addressed. It needs help. And they're like, boom, you nailed it. Let's get this thing. Let's take care of this, work on this. And so I so appreciate you stepping out, being a leader in that way. And that's why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast today and feature you and Venaera and what you're trying to do and make a difference in the world. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, David. It's been great.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, as we're wrapping up the podcast this week, once again, I want to encourage you to, of course, like and subscribe. We always love that. Will you leave your comments so we can pass those on to Jordan? Of course, connect with him. We'll have it all in our show notes. And if you found this valuable, share with others, inspire others by what you've learned and listened to today. Come back for our next episode. Until then, be well. Thanks, everybody, for listening.